Welcome back to Potions and Processing. I am your host, Raven White. In last week's episode, we wrapped up the nice little story about me being accused of witchcraft in my stay at a Christian school. I can't say I really enjoyed that story. I hope you did. On to bigger and better stories. Hard to say when most of my stories involve trauma, but some are more interesting or more fun to tell than others. At the end of one of my last videos, I put it out there that I want to know what you want to know, and I want to tell the stories that you're most interested in hearing. And while I do intend on telling all of my stories, sharing all of my knowledge, sharing all of the awareness, it would be interesting to share the things that are more pertinent or more interesting to you guys. So I kind of put it out there at the end, what kinds of things would you be interested in hearing about my life? And one of the things that people had expressed interest in was learning more about my chronic illness journey, and different types of situations where perhaps I had experienced medical neglect, or I had wished there had been better provider care. Now, if you've been around for a while, then you may know that in May, I had some MRIs done, and I found out I had brain lesions. This has been an incredibly scary journey for me. I was experiencing multitudes of neurologic symptoms for a while, but I did not necessarily know that they were neurological symptoms until they got really bad. Over the last couple of years, I had increasingly bad brain fog, trouble remembering things, trouble with words and remembering words with my word recall, and even sometimes in conversations, saying things, having the other person look confused, and them repeating back to me what I said, and me not having any recollection that that is what I said to them. This was something I attributed to being overtired, overworked, having other chronic illnesses that took up all of my energy and brain power. I run my own business, Curious Corvid Publishing. I am also a parent, a partner, and I run another job. I work another job with my partner. I'm a very busy person. Of course I'm tired. Also, have you seen the world? Who isn't tired and depressed these days? Besides that, I had tingling and numbness in my hands and in my feet that would come and go. I kind of attributed that to tiredness, to the aftermath of having a child, to having a hysterectomy, to a multitude of other situations. And I just kept kind of putting it off and brushing it off. Ultimately, I just did not want to return to the doctor. After I had my hysterectomy, I'd kind of sworn off going back to the doctor. It took me so much time to get a doctor to listen to me about my endometriosis and my PCOS and my very, very painful periods. I did not have the energy, the willpower to start over again and try and get someone else to listen to me about all of these new symptoms that I felt were probably something to be concerned about, but were not debilitating enough for me to really be worried about, and that I could not put off as something else. That is until this year. This year, it got really bad. I started forgetting how to do simple things, how to complete simple tasks, how to do the same job I have done over and over again for the last 6 years when I established my business. I was getting so much more tired, so much faster, and all of a sudden, the stoic nature that I've always possessed was gone. Every single filter that I've always had my entire life had felt like it was ripped away. The numbing and the tingling was so much more intensified, and now it was constant and full body. I had it in my face, and my face was numb. The chronic pain throughout my body had spread, and I had constant joint pain, widespread body pain. Throughout my life, I'd had this terrible rope hugging sensation around my chest that would kind of hype up during really stressful situations or after I'd had invasive medical procedures, like after I'd had my gallbladder and after I'd had my hysterectomy, and I'd started having them again. And it would knock the breath out of me, and it was so incredibly painful, and it was terrifying. And I couldn't find a way to accurately describe it to anyone other than someone choking the air out of my lungs around my chest. And it was terrifying. Bit by bit, pieces of me just began to fall away, and I couldn't walk without a mobility device. I couldn't drive anymore because my reaction times were too slow, and I started forgetting how to drive. When I was cooking on the stove, I left the gas on after I was done because I forgot. And as a hyper independent person, having to go from not needing help with basically anything to needing help with everything, my mental health completely depleted. And I felt like everything about me was just decimated. And I had no answers for what was happening. And so I went to the doctor. I went to the one doctor who I thought would believe me, and that was the pain doctor that I had finally started seeing for my chronic back pain. I went to him with a laundry list of all of the things I could think of that I was experiencing because I had started to Google a little bit about the things I had experiencing. And I know they say, oh, you should never Google your symptoms, but I disagree with that to an extent because I do think it's important to be informed. And I want to talk about that more in another video. But I went with a laundry list of all of the things I was experiencing, and I sat down and I went over them, and he listened, and he said, I think you have enough symptoms here that we should get an MRI of your brain, which is a really scary thing to be told, by the way. So on May 1st, I went in and I had a brain MRI. I had it done in the morning, and by the afternoon, the results came in, and I had several brain lesions. And the protective coating of your brain, mine was not doing so hot. I had demyelinization of my brain, much more than what is seen for a person of my age. They referred me to a neurologist who specializes in this thing. And I was originally supposed to see them in June, and it got bumped back to July. In the meantime, no one told me anything about what these brain lesions meant or what anything of my results would point to. I just had to wait for 2 months, over 2 months. And that was some of the worst 2 months of my life. During those 2 months, I started to research what some of the lesions were in the spots that I had them and what could cause those specific types of lesions. And there was a lot of different results that came up. Lyme disease, lupus, optic neuritis, lots of different things. But one thing that consistently came up was multiple sclerosis, which is a terrifying thing to come up when you are 34 years old, when you're any age, really. But it was a terrifying thing for me to think about being young and a young parent. It was a lot. My pain doctor also had me do some tests for, like, he had me do an ANA test and some tests for arthritises and things like that, and those came back negative. That's all I had to go on until I saw my neurologist. When I finally saw my neurologist in July, I had gathered enough material of my own education to make myself the most aware I could be to get the most out of that appointment as I could. I'd waited for so long that I wanted to be the most informed and get the most out of it. So I made a very detailed list of my symptoms, everything I was currently experiencing, how long my symptoms were lasting, any family history that I could think of, and I really didn't have much to go off of, but I did the best that I could. And then going back through my life, even into my childhood, because I had very painful growing pains throughout my childhood. I had a lot of strange, painful occurrences throughout my young adulthood. Throughout my appointment, he was very thorough. The appointment lasted probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours. He explained the lesions on my brain, and he said that they were MS like lesions, and that based on all of the symptoms that I had, it was his opinion that I did have MS, but that we had to prove it. And one of the ways to prove it was to do more MRIs, which are not my favorite thing because I am claustrophobic, but we had to do more MRIs to look for lesions on my spinal cord. If there were lesions on my spinal cord, that would confirm MS. He also had me do lots of blood work to rule out MS mimickers and do a whole bunch of blood work to look at all kinds of things in my blood. He had me do more ANA panels to look for other autoimmune diseases because they often are comorbid and they overlap. That's another important thing to keep in mind. A bunch of my blood work went off to the Mayo Clinic for that. And then he also had me do blood work to prep for MS medication so that if I did have lesions on my spinal cord, when I went back for my follow-up visit, we could start talking about MS treatments because MS treatments make you immunocompromised. And that was something we would have to also check into my blood for, sit and see what immunities I had and what I was vulnerable to, what I had been exposed to in the past, and anything that I would be susceptible to in the future. It was a lot to take in. I was a little bit discouraged that after waiting 2 months, I still didn't have a diagnosis, but I understood that we were at least on the track to getting one and having answers. I felt sick my whole life. I went through a lot, and I want to talk about that in my videos. I have gone through so many things. This specific journey has showed me how much I was overlooked in the system. And I really do believe that if I had been looked at just a little more carefully, I think this would have been noticed so much sooner. One of the hardest parts, I think, for me in dealing with all of this is the aftermath. Here we are today, and I have had my MRIs for my spinal cord. I just had them, and I just got my results, and I do have lesions on my spinal cord. One of the hard parts about this disease is that you can't undo any of the damage that's been done. You learn to live with it. You learn to live with it. And the disease modifying therapy that you start taking will prevent new lesions from occurring, hopefully, so that you don't lose any more pieces of yourself and you still live a long, fulfilling life. And I have a lot of hope. And I know that there's so much good to be had. And I understand that. I know that. I've been through a lot of sickness already. I've lost pieces of myself already. Literal literal pieces of myself. Of all the things I've been through, I guess I was kind of hoping to catch a break. So as of right now, I have just gotten the results of my follow-up MRI with my spine, and I have to go see my neurologist again to have everything confirmed, to talk about what treatment will be best for me going forward. Right now, they're saying I can't see them until November. It is currently August. That doesn't sound great to me. I'm hoping that they can see me a lot sooner than that. One of the big things is this is really fresh, so it's hard to talk about, and I don't know how to be like positive about it yet, in the sense that like I know that multiple sclerosis is very treatable. I know that we are living in a day and age where now it is very tackleable. Now is the time to be diagnosed with it if you're going to be diagnosed with it. And I very much get that. Uh I think I'm still just processing the fact that it's like real, even though I suspected that that was what it was going to end up being, the confirmation of it, of like seeing that on my MRIs and seeing, oh, yep, this is true, this is real, this is really happening, is still a lot to take in, especially after everything else I've already gone through. It's kind of like, wow, okay. But I also look forward to the day that I can use this as another way to bring awareness, because I really do think that my story and the things that I've gone through and the fact that I now have this, there are a lot of studies out there that link childhood trauma that happens to young girls, especially sexual trauma, to children, to young girls, and then women in their 30s and 40s developing MS later in life. There's quite a few studies out there linking that, and I just think it's very interesting. I just think it's very interesting. I have a lot of reasons to believe that I've had MS for almost my whole life. My neurologist thinks that I've had it for quite a long time. I think I've had it for quite a long time. I think I've had it, and I just, nobody noticed. Nobody saw the signs soon enough for me, unfortunately. And I just have gone decades without treatment, and that's why it's really bad now. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about everything, because this is potions and processing, and we're going to process the crap out of this. Remember, we may be different species, but we are all part of the same family. So please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I will see you next week.